June 12, 1945, 1400 hours, Camp Hearn, Texas. Medical officer Captain Harrison Whitfield lifted the fork to my mouth. I bit down. Then I couldn't breathe. Not from fear, from memory. What 5 years of starvation kills isn't just your body, it kills your ability to taste joy. My name is Elise Brenner. I'm 24 years old. I weigh 91 pounds. And in 72 hours, everything I believed about enemies, about Americans, about what it means to be human, would shatter over a plate of fried chicken. But we need to go back to the beginning, back to the moment I first stepped onto Texas soil and thought I was walking into hell. June 9th, 1945, 3 days earlier. The military transport truck groaned to a stop outside Camp Hearn. Metal doors swung open, and 23 German women stepped into heat that hit like a physical wall. 107 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of heat that makes your lungs burn just breathing. I was the 7th woman off that truck. My boots hit dusty ground and I looked up at barbed wire fences stretching in every direction. Guard towers, armed soldiers, everything we'd been warned about. I clutched my canvas bag against my chest. Inside, one change of clothes, a photograph of my mother and brother, and a book of Rilke's poetry I'd carried through 3 years of military service. Evidence of who I used to be before I became Wehrmacht Auxiliary Corps radio operator Elise Brenner, service number 447-923-B, stationed in Cologne until British forces overran our position on April 23rd. The woman beside me was shaking. Her name was Lieselotte Richter. Everyone called her Lotta. 22 years old, a clerk from Dresden who still tried to smile even when her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Behind us stood Margaret Hartmann. We called her Greta. 26, a medical assistant from Stuttgart with the stiffest spine among us. She'd told us on the ship crossing the Atlantic, show no weakness, give them no reason to single you out. We are German soldiers. We will maintain our dignity. But standing in that Texas heat, watching those guard towers, I wondered what dignity looked like when you were a prisoner of war in enemy territory. We'd been warned. Oh, how we'd been warned. In the final months of the war, stories had spread through German military units like wildfire. Stories about what Americans did to their prisoners, beatings, starvation. Prisoners worked to death in brutal heat. The propaganda had been specific, detailed, designed to terrify. I remembered the last broadcast we'd heard from Goebbels himself, May 1st, just 8 days before Germany surrendered. His voice crackling through my radio headset. The Americans will show no mercy. They are controlled by Jewish interests who seek our complete extermination. Those taken prisoner will suffer fates worse than death. Looking at those armed guards, at that barbed wire, at the vast emptiness of Texas stretching beyond the camp, I wondered how much of it was true. A woman emerged from the administration building. I expected a man. I expected someone harsh, militaristic, ready to enforce our punishment. Instead, we got Captain Florence Aldridge. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 32 years old, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. Her uniform was crisp despite the heat. Her bearing was military, but her voice when she spoke was neither friendly nor hostile, just professional. Welcome to Camp Hearn. You will be housed in Barracks 7. You will follow camp regulations. Roll call happens twice daily at 0600 and 1800 hours. Work assignments will be given tomorrow. Medical inspection in 1 hour. Any questions? We stayed silent. We'd been instructed during transport. Do not speak unless directly addressed. Do not show emotion. Do not give your captors any reason to single you out. My hands tightened around my canvas bag. My heart pounded against ribs I could count through my skin. I watched the guards shift their weight, looking almost uncomfortable. That was strange. Everything about this arrival was strange. No shouting, no violence, no visible cruelty. Just a female captain with a professional tone and guards who seemed uncertain rather than threatening. We were led to our barracks, simple wooden buildings, rows of bunks with thin mattresses, but clean, organized, functional. Not the dungeons we'd imagined. As I set my canvas bag on a bunk, I noticed something else. The blankets were adequate. The building had windows that actually opened. A schedule posted on the wall showed meal times, 3 meals per day. 3 meals per day for enemy prisoners. I didn't know what to make of it. Then the medical officer arrived, and my confusion deepened.
Captain Harrison Whitfield walked into our barracks at 1500 hours, carrying a clipboard and a stethoscope. He was 39 years old, though I wouldn't learn that until later. Birmingham, Alabama native, Johns Hopkins Medical School, class of 1930. A Southern doctor with careful hands and eyes that missed nothing. When Captain Whitfield began his medical examination with quiet professionalism, asking permission before touching, explaining each step of his assessment, I felt something crack in my certainty. "Name," he said, looking at his clipboard. "Elise Brenner." "Age." 24. He made notes. Then he asked me to step on a scale. I watched the needle settle. 91 pounds. Whitfield wrote this down without comment. Then he measured my height, 5 feet 7 inches. More notes on his clipboard. I saw him calculate something, then circle a number. "Open your mouth," he said gently. I did. He examined my teeth with a small flashlight. "Gum recession." Vitamin deficiency. Classic scurvy markers. He checked my eyes, my hair. He pressed his fingers against my ankles and frowned when the skin stayed indented. "Edema, fluid retention from malnutrition." He went through all 23 of us with the same careful attention, measuring, documenting, calculating. When he was finished, I heard him talking to Captain Aldridge outside the barracks. The windows were open. His voice carried. "Average weight is 87.3 pounds. Expected weight for their age and height range should be 125 to 135 pounds. We're looking at an average deficit of 40 pounds per individual." "What does that mean, Doctor?" Aldridge asked. "It means they're in stage 3 malnutrition, critical threshold. Their bodies have been cannibalizing muscle tissue to survive. If we put them on standard rations immediately, we'll kill them." "Explain." "Refeeding syndrome. When a severely malnourished body receives sudden adequate nutrition, it causes electrolyte shifts. Phosphate, potassium, magnesium levels crash. The heart can't handle it. Cardiac arrest within 48 hours. So what do we do? Graduated feeding protocol. Week 1, 1,200 calories per day, soft foods only. Week 2, 1,500 calories with vitamin supplements. Weeks 3 through 12, gradual increase to 2,000 calories. We have to ease their bodies back to normal function. I lay on my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd heard. They were calculating our survival. Not our punishment, our survival. Why would enemies do that? Greta gathered us after lights out, whispering in German. "Don't trust this. It's psychological torture. They're fattening us up for something worse." But Lot asked the question none of us could answer. What information could we have that matters? The war is over. Germany surrendered. What could we possibly tell them? Greta had no response.
The next morning, June 10th, I learned about Sergeant Augustus Montgomery. I saw him through the kitchen window during our morning work detail. He was a black man, perhaps 44 years old, with greying hair at his temples and steady hands that moved with purpose. He wore an army uniform and a clean apron, and he worked over enormous pots with the focused attention of someone who took his craft seriously. I had never seen a black person before coming to America. Nazi propaganda had taught me to expect savagery, to fear such encounters. But watching this man carefully season food that would feed prisoners, enemy prisoners, I felt something shift inside my chest. He moved like my grandmother had moved in her kitchen in Cologne, before the war, before the bombs, with respect for the craft. I was standing close enough to the kitchen to hear when Private Virgil Thatcher, a nervous 19-year-old guard, asked him a question. "Sarge, why are we cooking fancy for them? They're Nazis." Montgomery didn't look up from the pot he was stirring. "Because the Geneva Convention ain't suggestions, son, it's orders, and my orders say feed prisoners proper. But after what they did don't change what we do. My granddaddy was born into chains, grew up being told he wasn't human. I swore to God I'd never treat nobody that way. Don't care what flag they fought under. You understand me, Private?" "Yes, Sergeant." I stood there, holding a mop I was supposed to be using, understanding maybe 5 words of English, but comprehending everything from his tone, his bearing, his careful attention to his work. This man, whose grandfather had been enslaved, was preparing careful meals for German prisoners. The arithmetic didn't work, not by Nazi logic.
Not by any logic I'd been taught.
That afternoon, Corporal Edmund Sterling brought us extra water. It was 105 degrees, and several women looked pale from the heat. He set down additional canteens near our work area without a word, then walked away. Such a small thing, a few canteens of water. But I noticed, and noticing troubled me more than cruelty would have. That night, I touched the locket I wore around my neck. Gold, engraved with my mother's initials, K.B. Clara Brenner. She had given it to me the day I left for military service in 1942. I whispered to the locket in the darkness, "Mutti, you said Americans were beasts, but beasts don't calculate BMI. They don't study French cooking. They don't ask permission before touching. What if you were wrong?" The thought was terrifying, because if my mother was wrong about Americans, what else had she been wrong about? June 11th, Saturday. The smells started in the morning. At first I thought I was imagining it.
5 years of near starvation does things to your mind. You hallucinate food. You dream of meals that don't exist. But this wasn't a hallucination. Butter, paprika, herbs I'd forgotten existed. The scents drifted from the kitchen across the compound, growing stronger as the day progressed. By noon, the entire camp smelled like something I couldn't quite identify. Something rich, something that made my stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. I saw Montgomery through the kitchen window again. He'd been there since 0600 hours, 6 hours of continuous work. His apron was stained, his face shone with sweat from the heat of the stoves, but his hands moved with the precision of a surgeon. Corporal Sterling walked past our work detail and mentioned to another guard, loud enough for us to hear, "Sarge is cooking like he's back in Georgia, feeding Sunday congregation after church." By evening, the smells had become almost unbearable, not because they were unpleasant, because they reminded us of something we'd lost. I wrote in my diary that night, "The smells from the kitchen are paprika, butter, herbs I forgot existed. Greta says it's psychological torture, but torture doesn't require this much paperwork. Captain Whitfield documents everything, every weight, every calorie, every vitamin dose. This is medicine, not cruelty. I don't understand anything anymore." That same evening, Captain Whitfield made his rounds checking on Lotta, who had fainted during roll call, blood pressure dangerously low. He'd given her glucose solution, saline drip, immediate intervention. I overheard him talking to Captain Aldridge in the hallway. "Time is critical. Refeeding must begin tomorrow. The graduated protocol can't wait any longer." The War Department wants good publicity. Press visiting June 15th. Will they look presentable? They'll look alive, Captain. That's all I can promise. But alive is what the Geneva Convention requires, and alive is what medical science can deliver if we follow proper protocol.
Sunday morning, June 12th, 1945. I woke to the sound of a brass bell ringing across the compound. Mess call. We lined up as usual, 23 women in formation. I stood between Greta and Lotta, my stomach empty, my head light from hunger that had become so constant I barely noticed it anymore. The mess hall doors opened, and everything stopped. I saw the tables first, 3 long tables covered in white cotton tablecloths, not the bare wood we'd eaten from before. White cloth, like Sunday dinners in Cologne, like civilized meals I'd forgotten existed. Then I saw the plates, real porcelain, not tin mess kits, real plates. And then I saw what was on those plates, mountains of golden brown fried chicken. The pieces were enormous, glistening with seasoning, perfectly crispy coating catching the afternoon light, steam rising from them in visible waves.
Surrounding the chicken, bowls of mashed potatoes with butter pooling in yellow wells on top, green beans seasoned with something that smelled like bacon, biscuits piled high in baskets, steam escaping from their fluffy interiors, gravy boats filled to the brim. The woman in front of me stopped walking. The women behind stumbled, causing a confused shuffle at the doorway. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare. Sergeant Montgomery stood near the kitchen entrance. His apron was clean now. He watched our reactions with quiet attention. His expression was calm, patient, as if he'd expected something like this. Captain Aldridge stepped forward. Her voice was gentle, almost careful. "Please sit down. This is Sunday dinner. In the American South, it's tradition after church. Sergeant Montgomery has prepared this meal for everyone at the camp. That includes you." We moved to our seats like sleepwalkers. Military training kept us upright, but inside we were breaking. I found myself sitting directly in front of one of the chicken platters. The smell was overwhelming. Not just chicken, layers of scent. Salt, black pepper, paprika with its particular warmth, an herbal note I thought might be thyme, and underneath it all, the rich smell of properly rendered fat, of food cooked with skill and attention. My hands trembled as I placed them in my lap. Captain Whitfield stood near the door with his clipboard, watching us with clinical attention. Because that's what we were, not just prisoners, patients. "Go ahead," Corporal Sterling said. His Tennessee accent made the words soft. "Don't be shy. There's plenty more in the kitchen." Lotta was the first to reach. Her hand shook so badly she could barely grasp the chicken leg. She set it on her plate. Then she picked it up with both hands and bit into it. The sound that escaped her mouth was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Tears immediately began streaming down her face, but she didn't stop eating. She couldn't stop. And then we all broke. I reached for my own piece of chicken with hands that wouldn't stay steady. The coating was still warm, crispy to the touch. I lifted it to my mouth and bit down. The crust shattered between my teeth. That was the first sensation, the texture, the sound of it, crisp, perfect, the way fried chicken should sound, but hadn't sounded in 5 years. Then the juice, chicken juice flooding my mouth, carrying flavors I'd forgotten existed. Salt, yes, but not just salt. The paprika heat blooming across my tongue, the herbal complexity of thyme, the sharp bite of black pepper, and underneath it all, the fundamental taste of properly cooked meat. Rich, savory, complete. The meat pulled clean from the bone, tender, moist. Nothing like the stringy, overcooked scraps we'd choked down during the war. My eyes closed involuntarily. Tears came before I could stop them, and I kept eating. Around the table, all 23 women were crying while eating. Greta, who had sworn she wouldn't touch this food, who had promised to maintain her dignity, had grabbed 2 pieces and was sobbing into her hands between bites. Katharina Vogel, a 30-year-old baker's daughter from Munich, was crying so hard she was choking, but she kept reaching for more food anyway. Mashed potatoes, biscuits, anything she could get to her mouth. Hedwig Schneider, 45 years old, the eldest among us, the toughest, sat eating mechanically while tears ran down her face in complete silence. We weren't crying from hunger, not really. We were crying because they had broken us. Not with cruelty, not with torture. They broke us with kindness we didn't deserve. I looked up through my tears and saw Sergeant Montgomery standing in the kitchen doorway. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. Private Thatcher stood beside him, looking stricken. "They're crying, Sarge," Thatcher whispered. "Did we do something wrong?" Montgomery's voice was quiet, but carried across the room. "No, son, we did something right. First time in 5 years somebody treated them human. That's what you're seeing. That's what breaking looks like when it's done with mercy instead of malice." I set down my chicken. My hands were shaking too badly to hold it. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the kitchen. 22 women watched me. Captain Whitfield's pen paused on his clipboard. Captain Aldridge turned to observe. I stopped in front of Sergeant Montgomery. My face was wet with tears. My voice barely worked. "Warum?
I managed in German. Then I tried English, the few words I knew. Why? We are your enemies. Montgomery looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were kind but also sad, as if he understood something about this moment that I didn't yet. My granddaddy was born into chains, grew up being told he wasn't human, worse than an animal.
I swore to God Almighty I would never do that to nobody. Don't care what side they fought on, don't care what flag they wore, don't care what they believed when they were pointing guns at my country. He paused. Sunday dinner ain't about deserving, Mum, it's about souls. You got one, I got one, that's all that matters in the end. I didn't understand every word, but I understood everything. Then Captain Whitfield stepped forward. It's also Geneva Convention, Article 26. Prisoners of war shall be given adequate food. Adequate doesn't mean punishment rations, Miss Brenner. It means human rations. Sergeant Montgomery's recipe modifications account for your medical constraints. Lower fat content, controlled calories. This meal is 680 calories per person. Scientifically calibrated to begin reversing your malnutrition without triggering refeeding syndrome. He showed me his clipboard. Numbers, calculations, medical precision. You're not being shown kindness because we're soft. You're being shown competence because our system demands it. Competence includes mercy. Mercy includes following protocols that keep you alive even when you wore the uniform of our enemy. I walked back to my seat. I sat down. I picked up my fork, and I ate until I couldn't eat any more. Not because I was hungry, though I was, 5 years hungry, but because I was beginning to understand something that would change my life. The people we'd been taught were monsters, had systems that treated us like humans, and the people who had promised to protect us had built factories to kill millions. The meal lasted until 10 hours. When it finally ended, we sat in stunned silence, staring at empty plates. Captain Whitfield moved among the tables, making notes. No vomiting observed. Emotional response extreme but expected. Psychological component of starvation recovery. That night, I lay in my bunk, unable to sleep. My stomach was still adjusting to actual food, but more than that, my mind couldn't settle. I touched the locket around my neck. Mother's locket. Clara Brenner. Mutti, I whispered in the darkness. You said they were beasts. But beasts don't have filing systems. Beasts don't calculate BMI. Beasts don't cook for 7 hours for people they have every reason to hate. June 14th, Monday morning. Day 6 at Camp Hearn. Captain Whitfield conducted weigh-ins at 0700 hours. When my turn came, I watched the needle settle. 93 pounds. 2 pounds heavier than 3 days ago. Whitfield made a check mark on his chart. Good. Safe rate of gain. Within parameters. He examined my ankles. Edema reducing. Fluid retention improving. Color better. He looked at me directly. You're responding well to the protocol, Miss Brenner. Keep following the meal schedule. Don't skip anything. Over the next few days, I began to observe the camp's operations more carefully. Every morning at 600 hours, roll call. Corporal Sterling conducted it with mechanical efficiency. He'd learned more German phrases. His pronunciation was still terrible, but the effort was unmistakable. Work assignments were light, mostly cleaning duties, nothing strenuous, nothing that would burn calories we couldn't afford to lose. I noticed the guards watched us carefully during work details, not with suspicion, with concern. On June 19th, 1 week after the chicken dinner, Captain Whitfield introduced raw vegetables to our diet. Carrots, celery, small portions. I was eating lunch when he stopped by our table. Vitamin C. Your bodies are finally ready to process it properly. Scurvy reversal takes time, but we're seeing progress. I looked up at him. Captain Whitfield, why do you write everything down? Every weight, every meal, every symptom? He seemed surprised by the question, then thoughtful. Because if I don't document what works, Miss Brenner, the next time someone starves, and there will be a next time, war guarantees that, doctors won't know how to save them. You're not just patients, you're evidence. Evidence of what? That medical science can defeat propaganda, that competent treatment produces better outcomes than punishment, that the Geneva Convention isn't idealism, it's practical. He paused, then added quietly,
and because you're not numbers on a page, you're Elisa Brenner, radio operator from Cologne. You're Margareta Hartmann, medical assistant from Stuttgart. You're 23 individual human beings, and human beings deserve to have their treatment documented with dignity. This man didn't hate us, but he also didn't particularly like us. We were his patients, his professional responsibility, and his professionalism demanded he treat us with competence, regardless of his personal feelings. That was more powerful than kindness.
Kindness could be withdrawn. Professionalism was structural.
June 20th, the Red Cross inspection. A Swiss representative named Klaus Richter interviewed each of us privately. When my turn came, he asked, "Have you been subjected to physical abuse since your arrival?" "No." "Have you been denied adequate food?" I almost laughed. "No, we've been fed very well." "Do you feel safe here?" I paused. "I feel confused. We were told Americans would torture us. Instead, they calculate our BMI and adjust our calorie intake to prevent refeeding syndrome. We were told they were savages. Instead, they follow protocols more carefully than our own military did." "So you feel safe?" "I don't know what I feel, but I'm not afraid they'll hurt us. That much is true." June 26th, day 17 at Camp Hearn. My morning weigh-in showed 104 pounds, 13 pounds gained in 17 days. Captain Whitfield smiled. Actually smiled. "Excellent progress, Miss Brenner.
We're ready to advance you to full rations, 2,000 calories per day. Your body is strong enough now." That afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen on cleaning detail. Sergeant Montgomery was preparing dinner. I gathered my courage and approached him. "Sergeant Montgomery?" He looked up. "Yes, ma'am." "The chicken. From Sunday. Could you—" I struggled with English. "Could you write the recipe? How you make it?" He studied me for a moment. Then he reached for a small index card from a drawer. He wrote in careful block letters, occasionally pausing to remember measurements. When he finished, he handed me the card. I looked at it. Flour, paprika, salt, pepper, cayenne, thyme. Proportions, cooking temperature, time. "Why you want this?" he asked gently. I touched my mother's locket. "So I remember what proper treatment tastes like." His eyes softened. "You keep that, Miss Brenner. Keep it safe. Maybe someday you'll make it for your own family. Maybe you'll tell them where it came from. Maybe that matters." I folded the card carefully and put it in my pocket. That card would stay with me for 50 years. June 28th, Thursday afternoon. Captain Aldridge made an announcement after evening roll call. "Mail has arrived from Germany, processed through International Red Cross. We have letters for several of you." My heart stopped, then started again, pounding hard. Mail. From Germany. From home. "Brenner, Elise." I walked forward on legs that barely functioned, accepted the thin envelope with shaking hands. The handwriting on the front wasn't my mother's. It belonged to Frau Gertrude Dannenberg, our neighbor. I walked back to my bunk, sat down, stared at the envelope. Around me, other women were opening their letters. Some were crying quietly. I opened mine. The letter was dated June 10th, 1945. I read it slowly, then again, then a third time. "Dear Elise, I'm writing because the Red Cross asked for information about your family. I must tell you what they could not. March 2nd, 1945. RAF bombing raid, 02:30 hours. Our street was hit. Your building, number 47 Erwenstrasse, took a direct strike. Your mother, Clara, and your brother Wilhelm were in the cellar shelter. The building collapsed. They died instantly, Elise. The rescue workers said there was no suffering. Your father, Hermann, disappeared on April 17th during the chaos when the Americans entered the city. No one has seen him since. Your mother's last words to me were on March 1st. When Elise returns from the war, tell her I kept her poetry books safe. The books burned with the building. Everything burned. I'm sorry, Elise. If you can come home, please do. But I must be honest, there is nothing left here. Just rubble
and memories. Your neighbor, Gertrude Damenberg, March 2nd. My mother and brother had been dead for 3 months and 26 days.
They died while I was transmitting radio messages for a losing war.
My father was missing, probably dead. I sat there holding the letter, waiting for tears, waiting for some emotion to break through. Nothing came. The grief was too large to fit inside my body. I folded the letter carefully, put it in my pocket next to Montgomery's recipe card. Evidence of 2 different worlds. One destroyed, one possible. Around me, I heard other women receiving their own devastation. Lotta's parents were alive, but Dresden was ash. Katerina learned her husband had died in combat. Her 4-year-old daughter was with her grandmother in a refugee center. Greta's letter said her mother was gravely ill, begging her to return. The American guards noticed something was wrong. Corporal Sterling reported to Captain Aldridge. The prisoners aren't talking, they're just sitting there. Mail came through today. First news from home for most of them. They're grieving, Corporal.
Give them space, but watch carefully.
The next morning, June 29th, I couldn't get out of bed for roll call, not because I was sick, because I couldn't see the point. Private Thatcher came to the barracks. "Miss Brenner, you need to come to roll call, ma'am." I didn't move. He left. Returned with Captain Whitfield. The doctor sat on the edge of my bunk, didn't touch me, just sat. "You got bad news yesterday?" I nodded. "Want to talk about it?" "My mother and brother are dead. My father is missing. My home is rubble. There's nothing to talk about." Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Then, "You still need to eat breakfast." "Why?" "Because your body doesn't care about your grief, Miss Brenner. It just knows it needs fuel. And if you stop eating now, everything I've done to save you becomes meaningless." "Maybe it is meaningless." "No, it's not. You're alive. That's not meaningless. Your mother kept your books safe because she believed you'd come home to read them.
The books burned, but her belief didn't.
Honor that belief. Stay alive." He stood up. "Breakfast is in 15 minutes. I expect to see you there." I lay there for another 10 minutes. Then I got up, got dressed, went to breakfast. Not because I was hungry, not because I cared, but because Captain Harrison Whitfield had calculated my survival with such precision that refusing to eat felt like wasting his professional competence. June 30th, Friday. I found an American newspaper in the common area. Life magazine, June 11th issue. The cover showed skeletal survivors behind barbed wire. The headline read, "The Nazi Horror Camps." I opened it with trembling hands. Page after page of photographs. Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald, Auschwitz. Bodies stacked like firewood. Mass graves being bulldozed. Survivors who looked like animated skeletons. Testimony from American soldiers who'd liberated the camps. Statistics. 6 million Jews. Millions more. Political prisoners. Disabled people.
Roma. Homosexuals. Anyone the regime deemed unworthy of life, exterminated.
My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't hold the magazine. I had worn that uniform, the same uniform that ran those camps. I had transmitted radio messages for that government, messages I never questioned. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the full scope of it. But there had been whispers, rumors about camps, about Jews being relocated. And I'd told myself those were exaggerations, because believing it was real meant admitting that my country was capable of industrialized genocide. Greta appeared beside me, looked at the magazine, went pale. Mein Gott. Lotta joined us, then Katerina. We sat there, German women in American prisoner-of-war uniforms, looking at photographs of what our government had done. "Did you know?" Lotta asked in a tiny voice. "I heard things," Greta admitted, whispers about camps in the East. But I told myself it was wartime rumors.
"We wore the uniform," Katerina said flatly.
"We served the same government that did this. How can we claim innocence?" I thought about my work, radio operator, transmitting messages, orders. Had any of my messages helped facilitate this? I would never know, could never know. but the possibility sat in my stomach like lead. Corporal Sterling walked past, saw us gathered around the magazine, stopped. Those camps, what happened there? That's something your country's going to have to reckon with for a very long time, maybe forever. He paused. I don't know what you knew or didn't know, what you could have done different, but I do know that sitting here right now, looking at those pictures with horror on your faces, that tells me something. You're not monsters. You're people learning terrible truths about what was done in your name. That night I lay in my bunk holding 2 pieces of paper, Frau Dannenberg's letter, evidence of my personal loss, Montgomery's recipe card,
Evidence of an alternative. I had a choice forming. I couldn't articulate it yet, but I could feel it taking shape. Return to Germany, to rubble and guilt, and the impossibility of atoning for atrocities I didn't commit but served the system that did. Or stay, somehow, in a country that had treated me with more humanity as an enemy than my own country had shown to millions of its victims. The choice felt impossible. And yet, lying there in the darkness of an American prisoner of war camp, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, but possibility. The terrifying, exhilarating possibility that I could choose a different future than the one I'd been born into. July 15th, 1945. Captain Aldridge called a General Assembly at 10:00 hours. I have received orders from the War Department regarding your repatriation to Germany. Processing will begin on July 29th. You will be transported to New York, then to ships bound for Bremerhaven. Return to our homes.
What homes? After the announcement, we filed back to the barracks in silence, but once inside, voices erupted. Some women felt obligated to return, despite the devastation. Others struggled to find a reason to go back at all. That evening, after lights out, I whispered to the darkness. What if we didn't go back? Silence. Then Lotta's voice. What do you mean? What if we asked to stay here? In America? The barracks erupted in heated whispers. That's desertion, Greta hissed. We can't abandon our country when it needs rebuilding. What country? I shot back. The one that lied to us? That built death camps? That got my mother and brother killed for nothing? It's still our country, Elise. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, the only country that's treated me like a human being in the last 5 years is this one, the enemy country. Katerina spoke up. My daughter is in Germany. I have to go back for her. Then go, I said. I'm not saying everyone should stay. I'm saying, for those of us with nothing left there, what if there was another choice? For the next 48 hours, the idea consumed me. By July 17th, a group had formed, 11 women. Greta led the opposition, 12 women who felt duty-bound to return. On the evening of July 17th, I requested a meeting with Captain Aldridge. She received me in her office at 1900 hours. Captain Aldridge, I have a request, unusual request. Go on? 11 of us, we wish to stay. In America, not as prisoners, as displaced persons, as refugees. We want to immigrate. Aldridge's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, confusion, shock. You want to stay? Here? In the United States? Yes, ma'am. Miss Brenner, you understand you're asking to remain in the country that defeated yours, that bombed your cities. I met her eyes. Ma'am, you didn't defeat me. My own country did that, when it lied about what it was, when it built factories to kill millions, when it sent my mother and brother to die in a cellar for a war we couldn't win. I paused. You showed me the truth, Captain, that competence and mercy aren't weaknesses, that systems can demand humanity even when individuals might choose cruelty. I'd rather be a refugee in a civilized country than a citizen of one built on lies. Aldridge sat back. For a long moment she said nothing. Finally, Miss Brenner, I don't even know if what you're asking is legally possible. You're enemy prisoners of war. The Geneva Convention requires your repatriation. Then help us find another way, please. I'll send an inquiry to Washington, but I can't promise anything. I understand. You know you'll face hostility here, suspicion, people who won't forgive where you came from. I know. She pulled out a form, started writing. "Give me the names of the other 10 women." I listed them. When I finished, Aldridge set down her pen. "Miss Brenner, I fought in this war. I lost friends.
Part of me thinks you deserve to go back and face what you built."
My stomach clenched. But another part of me thinks that's exactly the kind of thinking that starts wars in the first place. Collective punishment. I'll send your request. What happens next is above my authority, but I'll advocate for you, because I've watched you these past 5 weeks. I've seen how you've changed, and I think maybe that's what victory actually looks like. Not revenge, transformation. July 18th. The telegram went to Washington. The waiting was excruciating. The 12 women who were returning to Germany avoided us now, not with hostility, but with distance. Greta confronted me on July 21st. "You're a coward, Elise." Maybe. Or maybe I'm just someone who's learned that loyalty to a flag means nothing if the flag stands for atrocity. "You're abandoning your people." "My people are dead, Greta. Every single one of them. What am I abandoning? Rubble?" I looked at her.
"Greta, I'm not strong enough to rebuild on that foundation. I'm just not. Maybe that makes me weak, but I'd rather be weak and honest than strong and complicit." She turned away, but before she left, she said quietly, "I hope America deserves you, Elise. I really do." July 25th. The response came. Captain Aldridge gathered the 11 of us. "The War Department has issued a conditional approval." Lotta gasped. I felt dizzy. "Conditional on what?" "You can be reclassified as displaced persons under special circumstances, but you'll need American sponsors. Citizens willing to vouch for you, provide housing, secure employment." She paused. "There's no guarantee you'll find sponsors, and even if you do, the immigration process could take months." "But it's possible," I said. "We can try." "You can try." Finding sponsors proved surprisingly possible. Corporal Sterling's sister, Ruth Sterling, was a 33-year-old schoolteacher in Bryan, Texas. She came to the camp on August 2nd. "My brother wrote me about you. Said you were the one who asked why when the others just followed orders. That's the kind of person America needs, Miss Brenner." She sponsored me. The local Baptist church, led by Reverend Josiah Caldwell, agreed to sponsor 3 women. The congregation voted on it. The margin was narrow, 214 to 178, but it passed. A wealthy widow named Mrs. Beatrice Worthington sponsored 2 women. My son died at Anzio. He wrote me from Italy, "Mom, when this war's over, forgive them." This is how I honor his memory. By September 1st, all 11 of us had sponsors. The 12 women returning to Germany shipped out on September 15th. I watched them board the trucks. Greta was the last to board. She paused, turned back, met my eyes. We didn't speak. She nodded once. I nodded back. Then she was gone. The years that followed were not easy. February 1946. Immigration approval granted. Released to Ruth's custody in Bryan, Texas. I found work as a translator at the Displaced Persons Office in Houston. $44 per week.
March 1947. A veteran outside my office spat at my feet, called me Nazi whore. I kept walking, didn't respond. Because what defense did I have? April 1948. Promoted to case supervisor. I processed 1,100 refugee cases that year. Holocaust survivors mostly. They knew I was German. Some refused to work with me. But others saw something. Maybe survival recognizes survival. A woman named Sarah Goldstein, Bergen-Belsen survivor, sat across from me filling out forms. "You're German," she said. "I was. I'm trying to be something else now." "Why?" "Because I can't carry what that country did. I'm not strong enough. So I'm trying to pay a debt I can never actually repay." She looked at me for a long moment. "Help me with these forms." I helped her. 1,100 times I helped. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. November 1951. I met David Hartwell at a church social, engineer, veteran of the Pacific Theatre. I told him everything on our 3rd date. "You could have gone back," he said, "but you didn't." I had nothing to go back to. No, you had a choice. Between easy guilt and hard growth, you chose growth. We married in June 1952, August 1952, citizenship ceremony, federal court, Houston, Texas. I stood with 37 other people. We raised our right hands. I hereby declare, on oath, that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. My voice shook on the word renounce, because it was real. I was renouncing Germany. That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign enemies, like the one I'd been. So help me God. The judge declared us citizens. I cried, not from sadness, from the weight of it.
The impossibility of it. The mercy of it. Elise Brenner was dead. Elise Hartwell was born. 1953. Margaret was born. My daughter. American by birth. 1955. Benjamin was born. They would grow up in Texas, speak English without accent, never carry my weight. I kept working. Displaced persons office until 1968, 22 years, 18,340 refugees processed. But in January 1947, something unexpected happened. I received a telegram at Ruth Sterling's house. Mother died November. Stuttgart unrecognizable. Nothing to rebuild on. Requesting sponsor information. Can I return? Greta. I called Ruth immediately, called Reverend Caldwell. Mrs. Worthington agreed to sponsor Greta. I have room for one more refugee, especially one brave enough to admit she was wrong. Greta arrived in Houston in March 1947. Thinner than I remembered, harder, but also softer somehow. You were right, Elise, she said when I met her at the bus station. There's nothing there but graves and guilt. I tried. I really tried. But I couldn't rebuild on that foundation.
I know. That's why I left. She moved to Massachusetts, found work as a nurse, built a different life, and every June 12th she came back to Texas. Because some families aren't born. Some families are built from broken pieces that somehow fit together. For 20 years, I kept Montgomery's recipe card in my desk drawer at work. Every day I'd see it, touch it briefly. But I never made the chicken. Couldn't bring myself to. Because that meal wasn't just food. It was the moment everything I believed shattered. But in 1964, Margaret asked me a question. She was 11, doing a school project on family history. "Mom, why did you come to America?" I told her. The hunger, the camp, the Sunday dinner that changed everything. "Do you still have the recipe?" "Yes." "Can we make it together? For the anniversary?" And I realized the recipe wasn't about claiming something I didn't deserve. It was about passing on evidence that mercy exists. "Yes. On June 12th. We'll make it together." June 12th, 1965. 20 years exactly. I stood in my kitchen in Houston, Texas, at 44 years old, and finally made Sergeant Montgomery's fried chicken. The house was full. David set the table. Margaret helped with sides. Benjamin was in charge of biscuits. The smell filled the house, butter and spices and possibility. The doorbell rang. Lottie arrived first. Lottie Patterson now, married, bringing potato salad. Dr. Greta Hartman came next, head nurse at Worcester General Hospital, never married. Others arrived. 7 of the original 11 were still alive. Then the Americans came. Corporal Sterling, principal now. Private Thatcher, farm equipment business owner. Captain Aldridge, 72, retired. Captain Whitfield, 69, teaching at UCLA. And Sergeant Augustus Montgomery, 64, retired. When I saw him, tears came immediately. He hugged me. "Still crying over my chicken, huh?" "Always will, Sarge." We sat down to dinner, the same meal, full circle. Before we ate, I stood to give my annual speech. 20 years ago today, I arrived at Camp Hearn expecting cruelty. I found competence instead. I found systems that demanded humanity even when individuals might have chosen otherwise. I found Sergeant Montgomery, who cooked for 7 hours for enemies. I found Captain Whitfield, who calculated my survival with scientific precision. I found Captain Aldridge, who enforced rules I didn't deserve protection under. I looked around the table. They didn't save me because I earned it. They saved me because their system demanded it. American bureaucracy, paperwork, Geneva Conventions. It's not romantic, it's plumbing. But plumbing saves lives. And sometimes, plumbing saves souls. Montgomery raised his glass.
My mama used to say, "Gus, you treat folks right not because they deserve it, but because you deserve to be the kind of man who treats folks right." I just followed orders. Her orders. Whitfield added, "My medical logs from June 1945 are textbook chapters now. Students ask why I documented so obsessively. I tell them, because Elise Brenner wasn't data, she was evidence that medicine defeats propaganda." Later, Montgomery and I sat on the porch. "You ever regret staying?" I thought about it. I regret that it took a war and a plate of chicken to learn that people aren't their governments. I regret the time I lost believing lies. I regret that my mother died never knowing I'd survive. I paused. But staying? Never. This was the right choice. "You did good, Elise. Built yourself a real life here. You gave me the blueprint, Sarge. You showed me the most powerful weapon isn't bombs. It's a meal served with dignity." Elise Brenner Hartwell died peacefully on November 3, 2001, at age 80, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Her obituary in the Houston Chronicle read, "Holocaust survivors called her the German who understood." She processed immigration for 18,340 refugees over 22 years. Her will specified that Sergeant Montgomery's recipe card be donated to the Smithsonian. It sits there now in the National Museum of American History. Beside it, a note in Elise's hand added in 1965. "Sunday dinner, June 12, 1945. The day I learned that America's power isn't its bombs. It's its bureaucrats who choose mercy over revenge. The day I learned that systems can be more humane than individuals. The day I stopped being German and started becoming human. EBH." Of the 11 who stayed, Elise lived to 80. Greta became head of nursing, died 2003. Lotta founded Refugee Assistance, died 2009. Katerina never found a sponsor. She returned to Germany, reunited with her daughter. We lost touch in 1952. Hedvig settled in Bryan with the Baptist Church, worked as a seamstress for 40 years, died 1989. Of the 12 who returned to Germany, some rebuilt lives, some disappeared into chaos, some we never heard from again. Greta was the only one who came back, the only one who tried both paths and chose America twice. The recipe card sits in the Smithsonian now. Thousands of visitors pass it every year. Most don't stop. It's just a recipe card, just faded ink on yellowing paper. But sometimes someone stops, reads the note, reads the recipe, reads the small plaque explaining what happened on June 12, 1945. And sometimes, rarely, someone understands. The most powerful weapon isn't violence. It's a system that demands humanity even when humanity seems impossible. It's a mess sergeant who follows his conscience instead of his anger. It's a doctor who documents survival instead of punishment. It's competence that includes mercy. It's the arithmetic that chooses addition over subtraction. It's a plate of fried chicken served with dignity to 23 enemies. And 23 enemies who became 18,340 refugees saved. Because Elise Brenner learned something on June 12, 1945. And she spent 56 years teaching it to anyone who would listen. The smallest things change everything. Choose them wisely.